I'm not someone who is ever really going to take a hard stand when it comes to the differences between gaming on consoles and on PC, because, personally speaking, I love it all. But with certain games, there can be a deciding factor that tips the scales one way or the other. And when it comes to Skyrim, I was dreading the act of re-completing the game for a second time after having it be sort of a nightmare on the Xbox 360. But now, with it being the game's 10th anniversary, after approximately 8,000 ports and re-releases, I decided it was finally a good time to listen to everyone who yelled at me to play on the PC. And it turns out that all of those eager people were kind of right for one major reason: the vibrant and kind of daunting world of Skyrim mods, which range from graphical fixes to interface overhauls to completion tools and, of course, to some goofy ass shit. The vast number of mods I used transformed the experience more than I ever could have predicted, and took it from something that was decidedly not for me to something that was actually pretty enjoyable. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Completionist New Game Plus, where I am recompleting the original 120 games I ever featured here on the channel. And to be honest with you all at home, ever since deciding to do New Game Plus as a show, just thinking about the word Skyrim has filled me with enough dread. It took me over 500 hours over the course of several years last time around, and in no small part because the version I played on the 360 just kept bugging out and crashing and deleting my game save, and I had to start over, I think, about 5 times or so. It was not great, so the thought of doing it again didn't exactly fill me with joy. But when I started playing on Steam this time around, it began to hit me just how vast and committed the modding community for Skyrim truly is, and how much potential it had to radically alter my experience and views in the game. So, with the help of some badass moderators from my Discord, like Blade Vancer, I put together an intimidatingly long list of potential mods. Here they all in 1 second as a quick flash. Go. Thank you. And we formulated a plan of attack for both completion and for how to make the experience smoother and more enjoyable. And you know what? It mostly worked. It also helped the game itself mostly worked, so overall it was a win-win. Some would even say it worked like a dream, which I get to do now often thanks to today's sponsor, Helix Sleep. Look at that clean transition, everyone. For those of you unfamiliar, Helix Sleep makes premium mattresses that fits your needs. Now, I've had my Helix Plus for a little shy of a year now, and it has drastically improved my overall sleep quality so much, which I absolutely need nowadays because 1, I am busier than ever, and 2, as a bigger guy, finding the right mattress is a make or break sort of thing for me. Fortunately, Helix gets that and has an online sleep quiz that matches your body type and sleep preferences to your ideal mattress. And once you pick up your mattress, it arrives right to your front door, with shipping being absolutely free, so you can easily roll it out of the box and set it up in a snap. Beyond that, Helix has a 100-night sleep trial guarantee, so if you don't like what you've got, you'll get a full refund. And on top of that, Helix mattresses also have a 10-year warranty and even offer flexible payment plans for you guys out there who don't want to sink all that money in right away. So don't sleep on this Helix mattress deal to sleep on a Helix mattress, which I know sounds confusing, but you absolutely know what I'm talking about. If you're looking for a new bed, check out Helix. You can go to helixsleep.com/thecompletionist or click the link in the box down below to save up to $200 off of your Helix mattress. Are you tired of all these sleep-related puns? Well, now that you've got a Helix Sleep mattress, you can take comfort in everything that they offer. But for me, I don't got any more time to rest. Let's complete the fuck out of Skyrim.
And the battle continues! This could turn it all around! This bout will determine who is the strongest once and for all!
Very few games get to live a life quite as long and rich as Skyrim has, with new versions and remasters getting released consistently over the whole last goddamn decade that the game has been out. Which I don't fully understand, but precedent does show that people will apparently just keep buying and playing it forever and ever and ever. It somehow still sells well and maintains a cultural omnipresence with a legion of passionate fans that will just keep finding new ways to fuck with Skyrim instead of buying brand new games. I assure you though, I am fully aware of just how beloved this game is by a vast number of people. And I think it's awesome even if it's not really a sentiment that I shared back when I first completed the Legendary Edition back in 2013. As the 5th entry in the long-running Elder Scrolls franchise, Skyrim continued the tradition of open-ended first-person RPG gameplay set in a vast and explorable world full of dungeons, dragons, and of course, cat people. But whether the people chose to be a cat or human or something else, they'll sneak, stab, and spellcast their way around, doing side quests and probably ignoring the main story. It's the same overall deal as other entries in the series, but just to an even larger degree. Even more explorable environments, spells, and items to loot, buy, or steal. Skills are ramped up through repetitive use, and there are all kinds of guild organizations that the player can either join, destroy, or join and then destroy. The freedom to just go wherever is what many people love about these games, but I personally think that if the main storyline in Skyrim were better, it wouldn't feel like a chore to go back to it. For those of you guys not in the know, Skyrim is the story of a pirate who married Princess Zelda before befriending a dragon that looks and sounds like Macho Man Randy Savage in order to... Sorry, wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself. In the base game of Skyrim, the player character is known as Dragonborn and basically has to slay a legendary dragon. And honestly, that was kind of it. In general, I found it to be a little too formless and directionless for my taste, but I understand that the massive world of Skyrim, and Elder Scrolls for that matter, has tons of lore that I have no idea exist, and people love it. I also got really frustrated on a technical level because the game crashed and bugged out so many times that I almost tempted to just bail on completing the game altogether. So between all of that, the hundreds of hours I sank into Skyrim back then ended up feeling mostly like a slog, and really highlighted the fact that a game like Skyrim just isn't built for completion. But that, my friends, is where the modding community came in hot. As one of the most frequently modded games, Skyrim on PC offers literally thousands of ways to alter the Skyrim experience. So I decided to just go for it. I looked at over 400 potential mods to play with, and while I ended up going with around a quarter of them, it was kind of like being at the world's most glorious video game buffet. There were some seemingly tiny fixes that ended up having a huge impact, lots of little polishes and cleanups, and a few that radically changed gameplay or streamlined the completion experience altogether. And then of course there's all the goofy shit, like turning the dragons into Macho Man Randy Savage, which I'm just never not gonna do. I mean, come on, that's hilarious and will always be hilarious, and I will die on this hill. Throughout this video, I'll run through a decent chunk of the mods I used, both because they're the main reason this playthrough was so different, and because the modding community for this game deserves all the love and recognition in the world. I mentioned earlier that I didn't really understand why this game just kept getting re-released, but I do love the way the community has taken the baton from the developers and just ran with it. Because even if the original unmodded version of Skyrim wasn't really for me, it's still a big, appealing sandbox that clearly provided a perfect foundation for various modders to build upon. And it has the bonus perk of drastically streamlining completion, taking it from something that should basically never be attempted into a large but doable challenge. Because last time, developing an idea of what completing Skyrim would even look like ended up being a whole thing. But now, with the help of some of these mods, I was armed with checklists and goals that I could focus on from the very beginning. And you guys know how much I love a good checklist in my games. It's like drugs. I felt so much more prepared for Skyrim this time around, particularly because I had so much help in formulating a plan. A big thank you to my mods, specifically Bladevancer, for helping me figure all this out. I don't know if I would have had it in me to spend another 500 hours on this game, but now, instead of having to relive that buggish nightmare, I get to step into a brand new world and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Which, spoilers, it's pretty damn deep. Skyrim Skyrim is an objectively insane game to try and complete, even for me. To do it again is truly an act of madness, but my hope was that installing so many mods would trick my brain by making it look and feel like a totally new and different experience. And to be honest with you, it really did. I've never really been an Elder Scrolls guy, but this game looked better, sounded better, ran smoother, and crashed way less with mods on. It even helped me bring a bit more appreciation for Skyrim and the Elder Scroll games in general by shaping it into something much friendlier towards my completion-centric approach. And look, I obviously don't demand that every game come to me and mold itself into what I want it to be. Lots of people enjoy aimlessly wandering around the world of Skyrim and getting into shenanigans, and that's truly great. It's essentially what this series is for, with the stories acting solely as a framework for exploring the world and finding dope gear. But if I'm going to be forced to complete this game a second time, then at least I want to complete to have some sort of meaningful metric that I can track as I play the game, instead of the vague and shifting parameters I followed last time. But before getting into all of those, I started out with some comprehensive mods that patched a bunch of problems all at once, most notably the unofficial Skyrim Special Edition patch, which was a compilation of all kinds of little bug fixes and optimizations made by the Skyrim modding community. There were a few more of these too, which were all intended to just smooth out the overall experience of playing the game and hopefully avoiding the sort of technical issues I had last time. It affected everything from the textures to the lighting, and it made the game feel like it was released in 2017 instead of 2011. There were also a bunch of mods that were about targeting specific things, like the Sky UI mod, which optimized the overall user interface and menus to run smoother on a PC. For a game that people like to insist is best played on PC, all of the menus in Skyrim feel way more optimized for console, so this helped me sidestep that. Now there are a bunch more, but the fact that I didn't especially notice them means they were doing their job. One that I did notice though is the lip sync fix, which helps the characters' mouths match the dialogue they're saying, and for such a relatively small thing, it felt like a weirdly huge deal and made all the NPCs feel a little more like actual people. It was also helped by mods that totally overhauled the audio, from the sound effects to the dialogue to the soundtrack. It helped avoid a problem I ran into last time, in which the score had gotten incredibly overbearing and monotonous, especially hundreds of hours in. But this time around, I mostly just used other tracks from outside the game to provide my own Skyrim soundtrack, and I stand by it. The next big category that the mods fall into is gameplay. Again, it's a lot of little stuff that doesn't seem like it would fundamentally change the experience, but ends up adding up to something pretty transformative. This ranges from stuff like a slider that made lockpicking quicker, to a mod called Wildcat that made weapons deadlier, in an effort to get the combat to a place that felt a little less spongy and monotonous. There was another mod that improved the dragon AI in order to make those fights more engaging as well. And while it's been long enough since I played the original that I couldn't necessarily feel the full weight of the differences, it definitely all felt way smoother and less repetitive. And between all the mods that I used and all the ones that I looked at as possibilities, there's a ton of hyper-specific stuff that, like mods that pick one microscopic element of the game and tweaks it to either make it stand out and be more dynamic, or blends it in more seamlessly into the game to be less distracting. And although I was initially worried that the insane number of mods would break the game, they really didn't. They mostly just made it more fun. And while the game still wasn't without bugs and crashes, it was a night and day difference compared to my first playthrough many years ago. The mods I used all added up to a much more polished experience, even with the extra bits and joke-centered mods I'd thrown in. Because on top of the Macho Man Randy Dragon mod, the Mud Crab mods, which made the Mud Crabs, which were wearing top hats, and my sword looked like Cloud's sword from Final Fantasy VII, which automatically made it 1,000 times cooler, I also used a pirate pack because I can't get enough pirate stuff for whatever reason. It just helped add to this really surreal but cool feeling the mods created. By the time I looked around and took stock of what I'd become, it was fully apparent just how deep down the rabbit hole of Skyrim mods I'd gotten into. I used a Zelda pack to turn the women I married into Princess Zelda, which meant that I eventually became a Buster sword wielding pirate who hung out with Princess Zelda and rode around on a dragon that wouldn't stop yelling Macho Man Randy Savage quotes. And you know what? I wouldn't have it any other freaking way. I fought against the idea of playing Skyrim on the PC for so long and decided to finally give it a try just to make everyone happy, only to discover that there was a vast and hilarious universe of mods that would transform a truly tedious personal experience into a a wild adventure I truly did not expect to go on. It also let me take advantage of little glitches and exploits, which I consider to be a huge part of these games, and is something I've always gotten a lot of enjoyment from. But it was nice to be able to take advantage of that stuff without being nearly as worried that I was going to crash the game and mess it all up, although I still avoided the console commands for exactly that reason. The main thing the mods did to help me get on board with the Skyrim experience is they made completion into something that was actually worth working towards. One major completion mod that helped me with all of those extra quests was the appropriately titled Sky Complete mod, and provides all sorts of checklists and menus that helped me out with tracking side quest statuses, keeping up with the collectibles like the huge number of books, and all that sort of highly useful stuff. A real quick shout out to the YouTube video that exists showcasing this mod, because everyone in the comments in that video was talking about how it was made specifically for me. So shout outs to that mod, shout outs to the creator of that mod, and shout outs to the fans in the comments in that mod video that saw that. It really gave me the confidence going into this playthrough. Having a good way to track objectives is essential to completion, and since the original version of the game was nowhere near focused on that at all, it fell by the wayside. But there is nothing on this planet that looks cooler than a completed checklist, and I stand by that still, especially considering that the side quests and various optional items and locations are the meat and potatoes of Skyrim. With the mods, I blew through the lore and the story much faster this time around, but all of the main plot stuff still kind of feels like an afterthought, a loosely sketched out quest narrative that provides a through line, even though everyone involved knows that's not really the main appeal of these games. And even with all the mods, the world is so big with so many different locations, people, and quests that a lot of it has a tendency to run together just by virtue of how vaguely similar everything is. I especially noticed this with dungeons and certain regions. There's so much stuff, and it doesn't all feel as diverse as it could, although it was certainly less of an issue with the mods installed than it was when I played on a console. Which brings me to the last big mod I wanted to highlight, which is also about tracking completion, but in a much cooler and more immersive way than with some simple checklists. Not to insult checklists, I will obviously always love them, but the legacy of the Dragonborn mod takes the idea of checklists and visualizes it as a super dope museum that you can walk through to see all of your progress, which serves the double purpose of streamlining the process while also being pretty awesome. It is really emblematic of the way that all of the mods took an experience that I have always said is decidedly not for me and turned it into something that I actually didn't mind doing. A big part of that is all the technical fixes, because nothing makes the completion process more frustrating than having to deal with constant crashes. But it's even more fundamental than that. The formless, sandboxy nature of Skyrim and the other Elder Scrolls games have just never really vibed with me all that well, but the mods allowed me to consistently customize that experience until it did. They transformed the game completely, not only making it more playable, but also turning completion into something more than a complete waste of time. Plus, it added Macho Man Randy Savage, which is an addition that could have improved literally every single game ever made. Yes, every single one. I know what I said. And at the very least, if you don't believe that, I turned all the spiders into Spider-Man. That is the best mod in the game. No more spiders. Fuck spiders. Fuck spiders 2011. Fuck spiders 10 years later in 2021. Fuck spiders. Long live Spider-Man. The last time I completed Skyrim, I got very frustrated for lots of reasons, but mostly because this game's total disinterest in being completable meant that even after struggling with technical issues to complete the game over the course of 500 goddamn hours, I basically got nothing for my troubles. And I know that's because this isn't that kind of game, but to play that one for that long to only reach a point where I just kind of stopped didn't feel great. And since I basically had to decide for myself what completion of this game even entailed, it felt even more arbitrary. There was no reward, no little star next to my profile, and no new cool gear or costumes. There wasn't even really the usual emotional psychological reward where I get the satisfaction of scrolling through a bunch of completed lists in order to bask in my achievement per se. But now, thanks to the mods, I actually got a decent dosage of that injected into my Skyrim experience. There still isn't really a reward for getting 100%, but the completion mods at the very least least gave me all kinds of checklists and markers that make progress feel like less of a vague and nebulous thing. But truth be told, as much as I love checklists, which is a lot, I was even more in love with the legacy of the Dragonborn Museum, which is even better because it's a checklist that I can walk around in. Every game should have something like this. A list or graph or grid is great, but being able to see everything I collected on display felt really awesome and actually felt like a tangible accomplishment. Beyond the satisfaction of getting to see all my collectibles organized and displayed, the wide variety of mods basically gave me the opportunity to create my own rewards by messing with the game. Becoming a pirate and marrying Princess Zelda are their own rewards to themselves, and felt like something I earned by choosing to play this version of the game. Because, as I've mentioned it, all the credit in the world for making this game reasonable to complete goes to the modding community, who I have so much respect for. Unfortunately, the new anniversary edition of the game that's coming out very soon is going to mess with how a lot of these mods function, which is a huge bummer, because these modders are true heroes, and it's frustrating to see that the game does not recognize or respect their efforts. These guys basically fixed the game in their own free time, and that should be rewarded, not punished. But even with that impending change, it's so impressive what they've accomplished here. I was absolutely dreading having to go back and complete Skyrim again. And although it took some effort, I was shocked to find that I actually had a pretty decent time. So if you're planning to complete Skyrim, then you absolutely need to incorporate some of these awesome mods, because doing it without them is a ridiculous task that should not be undertaken. But with the mods, hell yeah, because as Macho Man always says, the cream always rises to the top. When I recompleted Skyrim on Steam, there were 4 deaths, which probably doesn't sound like a lot, and that's because, well, it isn't. It's definitely less than last time, but that's because a lot of those deaths last time were due to overall jankiness rather than anything related to the game's actual difficulty. 129 mods used out of the 400 that were considered, which probably sounds like a lot because, well, it is, but they were all invaluable. Even the small ones that focused on a specific technical element. The game looked and sounded so much better, and was also just easier and more fun to play. 75 achievements unlocked, which is the same as when I played it last time on the Xbox 360. The act of accomplishing all of those achievements felt widely different though, even if the list itself was technically the exact same. 128 hours of total playtime, which is about a quarter of what it was before. Now, I should be clear that the 500 hours it took me last time was largely due to the stop and start nature I had with the game. Things would crash, then I'd lose hours and hours of progress over and over again. I'd stop playing the game for a while, forget where I was, then restart because it was easier than just remembering where I left off. So it wasn't just 500 hours of like completing and collecting things, but doing it repeatedly until I felt like I was going to lose my mind. So the mods shaved a bunch of that time off by virtue of making sure the game actually worked. And 500,000 ports and re-releases of Skyrim over the past 10 years. That number is highly accurate. You can fact check it yourself if you want. I was really nervous about the thought of recompleting Skyrim because it was an endless nightmare last time around. But now, playing it on Steam, I had the awesome help of all of my Discord mods out there to help organize a plan. And of course, a big thank you to everyone in the modding community who has contributed to the insane levels of customization available in this game. But honestly, all of it makes it kind of difficult to even give Skyrim a rating, despite my feelings on ratings. Completing it without the mods is both foolhardy and meaningless, and even with the mods, it's quite a lot. Finish it feels weird because the main storyline in Skyrim is so beside the point. Essentially, you should play Skyrim however the way that you want to play it. Mods or no mods, side quests or no side quests. Just dig into that sandbox and do whatever sounds fun to you, which is why I still give this game my completionist rating of play it, with the asterisk and acknowledgement that just playing it can mean 1,000 different things.
Play it!